So welcome. I'm going to be putting some pencil crayons, some graphite, and a little bit of charcoal, and maybe some marker on here. Basically, the idea is the natural smudging that's already started here is what's actually going to be the kind of abstract element in this piece. So here, we've already started. So I was just filling in some of the things. When you do the image transfer, it doesn't all transfer. I don't like to fill everything in, but I like to fill in some of the things, and it sort of gives a dynamism. Here you'll see a darker black, so you get some, also some graphite. So the charcoal with the graphite, so you get all these different blacks. You get the transfer, the Xerox sort of toner. So all of those things sort of create a more rich, organic palette, right? So I'm gonna get started, and yeah, let's see where it goes. So I'm gonna start with some colors here. I like to start off with some of the colors that are in the originals, or like cousins of those colors. So for example, this Mark McGuire is super famous Mark McGuire rookie card. Oakland A's is green. The card was sort of this wood sort of border. There's, I think, also a different kind of green in the baseball card. The back was sort of a yellowish sort of thing. I've already put some of these yellows. The Lego box has a yellow up here, and then there's the dark red. So I like to sort of start just so that there's some kind of rationale in the color. So with related colors, again, to evoke that original image, but we're not at all constrained by that. Okay? So what I like to do, say in this series, the way it's evolved is I get these smudges. From putting charcoal and graphite and whatever to fill out these things. And I just let it naturally mark up the page, and it actually makes this kind of beautiful abstract base. And then what I do is I rationalize that random stuff by starting to add color and starting to color those little things as if they're, there's some kind of design. So, so for example, here I could color the actual jersey, which is a kind of green, but you don't want to be too rational, so maybe I'll also just start going with the border, and it has to be hardly perceptible, is how I treat it. And even switching things, again, we're trying to be more, for lack of a better word, impressionistic. We're trying to be more impressionistic. But I don't mean in the sense of the impressionists, I mean in the sense of just conceptually trying to be more impressionistic. So anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. And we'll just continue here. So a little bit of green there, and just some faint, color some stuff in. The more I've sort of done this series, the more I've noticed delicate marks are nice, but you want contrast at the end of the day. So now this blue isn't really found anywhere, but I don't care. I'll put it in the sky here just to enrich in that black. So ultimately what I like in a piece, which sort of gives it staying power for me, is where I kind of don't know what's going to happen. It's sort of one of my lines. It's probably not an original thought, but it's original for me, is the hallmark of good art is unpredictability. And my classic example for that is, say, if there's some pop song that you've never heard before, and you know what the lyrics are going to be, and then what the next lyric is going to be before you've even heard it, and you've never heard that song before, that's predictable. And usually bad art is predictable. It's often predictable, it's kind of obvious. And good art, it just keeps you full of surprises. You're trying to make a rich, like, oh, how strange. And I actually am trying not worried. I kind of like that I'm talking while I'm doing this, because sort of distracts me from thinking too much about where things should be going. So that's good, you know. It's a different kind of green. Let's see. So yeah, so you don't want to get too pretentious here. I'm just doing the background. You almost don't want to do too close to the original. Otherwise it's like some of the magic sort of disappears at that point. So this is part of the Nostalgia Studies series. And so what I'm doing is I'm juxtaposing this old Karateka 5 1/4 inch floppy disk, which have become one of my favorite icons. It's been actually I've had these images of 5 1/4 inch discs for a very long time, like maybe since 2013, and it's 2019, and they've been really tough to use. I even made big paintings of 5 1/4, but they never really worked out. It was a simple tracing. And so I found the image transfer technique was very friendly to this sort of iconography finally. So I sort of feel like I finally found my a way to use that iconography. So yeah, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. You'll notice if you go to my Instagram, I have a lot in recent images because I'm so excited to use it because I think it looks so cool, all right? And so, just gonna keep going here. Sometimes I do the foreground, sometimes I do the background, sometimes I do the light, the back. You know, sometimes hard, sometimes light. You want to kind of keep things unpredictable. So here, you can go hard. And here you start to just get these irrational things. I mean, this is not what I'm used to, but maybe that kind of pinkish red goes with the Lego box. So here we're gonna, so I'm dancing between rational and irrational. All right. Here we got the red spaceman. This is Mobile Command Center, if I recall correctly. And here are the names. They have great names, all these Lego sets from the 80s. They call it Classic Space now. There's some really good accounts on Instagram. Should you be so interested, I just find them extremely beautiful. And that's part of what this is about as well. Not only are these just nostalgic images from the past, which in and of itself is not necessarily a particularly interesting subject matter. Nostalgia, I mean, we're all nostalgic for certain things. But my overall thesis, the reason why I feel like this is kind of worthwhile is because I think there's something special about, this is all from the 1980s here, and there's something special about what happened with design in the 80s, and I think it's actually extraordinarily beautiful and underappreciated. And bizarrely, I mean, you look at, I mean, some of the fine art from the 80s, I mean, the late Warhol is awesome, but there's a lot of sort of junky art from the 80s, and I'd go, you know what, I think I like some of these, a Karateka disc more than I do a Francis Picabia, even though Francis Picabia is great and everything. But, you know, I sort of see, I like to have sort of a radical unsnobbiness when it comes to iconography. And so for me, that means really appreciating what's going on here, treating this as a Renaissance painting. This is like a Renaissance painting, and in my world, I see it all on the same sort of field, on the same level. Okay, even this, I mean, but then it's just like, okay, it's text, but it's almost like a weird Warhol of sorts, okay? So anyway, so we're gonna keep going. Do some more drawing, some more coloring with the pencil crayons, or colored pencils as they like to call them. And you might think, oh, isn't it distracting making a video while you're doing this? Bizarrely, it might be a good thing because it's sort of it's distracting me from what I'm doing with the colors, which is maybe resulting in a more unconscious, less self-conscious coloring method, right? Like it's a little bit more unconscious when I'm thinking about what my audience is thinking and whatever, right? So it kind of, all that sort of it sort of occupies my rational mind, freeing my irrational mind to express itself. It's one way of sort of, so maybe this whole filming while you work, as far as my process is concerned, could actually maybe work, you know? And another aspect of this is sort of letting, it's almost like a child coloring book, sort of child coloring book coloring is what I'm doing. I mean, and that kind of goes with the whole nostalgia sort of element, and kind of goes also with, you know, what sometimes gets called neo-expressionism, or primitive, neo-primitivism maybe, or something. Where it's really just, you know, it's expressionism, so it's about, in a sense, the emotion, and not like some sort of rational, conceptual. It's about, you know, when Basquiat puts down a yellow and a white, it's just putting stuff down. He's not worrying about it. He's expressing himself, you know, through color. And so we're kind of employing similar tactics here. And so another fun thing I love to do is to do a color that's very close. Sharpen this. So that red up there, this is kind of a pinkish red, and here I have a darker red. And I like to even just sneak this in, just to fuck with people. I'm gonna try and keep this PG-13, actually, for the future. But yeah, and I like doing stuff that's hardly noticeable. Like, you know, like, that gives depth, and like, even though we're doing almost this childlike drawing, we're gonna do it with such subtlety that it, like a child would never do it with this detail. So it's not simply, there is worth here. It's actually, and it goes to show, like, this is actually harder than it looks, which speaks to another point I bring up, which is, it's harder to be irrational than it looks, like when you're drawing, because your body is or your brain is constantly trying to rationalize everything. So it's constantly wanting to fill the void, to not leave things unfinished. And it's actually, it looks easy, but it's actually harder than it looks to accomplish that. It actually takes training. See, I'm doing it, like, you know, you can always tell, if you ever go to an art class, one of the things you'll notice is how finished and perfect kind of everybody wants to make everything. They're worrying a lot about how everything's kind of tight. And to me, I've started to, that's almost a kind of amateur-esque sort of, it's a sign of a, I mean, not to be, you know, depending on what you're trying to do, but oftentimes that's the sign of an amateur, you know, or someone that, someone that kind of doesn't spend a lot of time doing this sort of stuff, you know. And another thing that's interesting too is, I'm not worrying about, let's say, too much. I mean, about making things that won't look good, because I can always, this is sort of a creamy colored paper, and I can always take a white marker afterwards, acrylic marker, and cover up, and that'll create a beautiful mark. So this is sort of like the process that's developed over, you know, with these things, with these nostalgia studies images. And so, yeah, so it's fun, you know. So how are we doing? Yeah, so, and you know, it gets tempting to do more and more, but again, the art is to sometimes just stop and don't go too far. Like they say, half the battle is knowing when to stop, right? And you also want to do hard and light just to vary things up, right? Because you need contrast. That's what makes things beautiful, generally speaking. Oh, and you know what I just remembered? This set had this beautiful green glass, the Lego glass. We're going to celebrate that a little bit here. We're just going to do a straight up color job. Oh, look at that. Yeah, and then it's just like, so we're kind of celebrating that here. I think there's even a windshield. We're gonna do all that. So that's exciting. Yeah, because it's just beautiful. The colors were beautiful. Green Lego glass, there's only maybe 5 or 10 sets that used it max. And yeah, they all look really good. It's interesting they didn't bring it back. If I worked for Lego, I would probably say, hey, if we really want to, I'd ditch the Star Wars license that they're probably paying a fortune for, and I'd say, because that's probably preventing them from relaunching the classic space. That's my theory on that. I'd ditch the Star Wars license, and bring back classic space. And then you really want to be badass. If I was in those meetings, I'd be like, and we'll bring back the green glass, just to show we know what we're doing, you know? Just for the hobbyists, that'll be like, people won't be able to resist. If we make a decent designed spaceship, like, you're gonna sell out of that thing. Should probably be working in advertising or something, but that's what my dad would like, but I continue here, so. Let's continue. So actually, I'm gonna take a break and take a look.